a little bit about how the internet is actually constructed. It is a layered architecture. I don't want to make that overly rigid or prescriptive, but it's helpful to think of it as a layered architecture. And what happens is that as you work your way up in the layers, you abstract from the behavior of the lower layers. You actually hide some of the details. And as a consequence of this abstraction going upwards, there are emerging properties that come out of those abstractions. And what's interesting about the emergent properties is that as you get up to the point where you're in the application space, you're in a universe which is very nearly unbounded because it is an artifact of software. It's literally an artifact of what the software, how the software interprets the bits that it's moving around. The consequence of this notion of emergent property is that the jurisdictional aspects of who is responsible for what, or how do you go about enforcing some particular practice, might vary from one layer to another, which is why, for example, we might tolerate an ITR environment which is focused on the layers of physical interconnection. But we might not tolerate an ITR environment that looks up into the application space and says something about content and what we can and can't say or do. So I think that we're going to have to keep in mind that order arising out of this abstraction and emergent properties is going to vary from one layer to another. Second point, I think, is that the internet has evolved successfully over the last 30 years of its operation, primarily because it's been largely a regulation-free environment. Most of the decisions that get made are freely made among parties. The protocols that are invented and adopted are a consequence of consensus in the IETF. The decision to interconnect or not, or even to build a piece of internet, or to choose a particular piece of equipment or a particular version of software is entirely open. And each individual operator chooses, even you do, when you buy a router to put at home and build a Wi-Fi station, you make a choice. Nobody dictates to you anything, except perhaps you should buy one that does the following things, because if you don't, it won't work. It should do IPv6 now because you need IPv6, things like that. So I think that one core principle that we don't want to lose is that the relatively deregulated environment has allowed a lot of other forces and incentives to choose a way forward for internet to evolve. Prescribing its evolution with a set of constraining treaty-like agreements does not sound like we would reproduce in the next 20 years what we have enjoyed in the last 20.